This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week is my son's 17th diaversary, 17 years with type 1, to mark what's really his entry into being a young adult. With T1D, he's almost 19. We're going to take a look back at when he was a lot younger. We've got a replay of the first time I talked to Benny for this podcast, back in 2016. It's a conversation that also includes my husband and my daughter. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and you know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. I am not great about remembering Benny's exact diaversary, and most of the reason why is because his diagnosis was prolonged, I would say. It really only took a week, maybe a week and a couple days from the time that I called our pediatrician and said, I don't like what I'm seeing, something's really wrong, to an actual in-hospital diagnosis and all the education that goes with it. But we had so many bumps along the way. And I've told these stories before. You know, a fasting blood glucose that was normal, it was 80, and that was on a Monday. And then some subsequent diagnoses of things that we now know were just symptoms, you know, infection, things like that they treated. And we thought, yeah, we got it. And then finally, the A1C results, which came back 5 days after that initial fasting blood glucose, which is when they sent us to the hospital. All of that to say, I remember the days of the week. Monday was the pediatrician. Saturday was the phone call to go to the hospital, but I never remember the actual dates. Social media memories usually remind me. And sure thing, they came up this morning. So I'm recording this on Benny's actual 17-year diaversary on December 2nd. December also means, and I need to tell you one quick thing about Mom's Night Out, that the early bird special for Charlotte is over. I do have a promo code for you that you can use on the regular price to save $30 off. And that promo code is MNO30, Mom's Night Out, MNO30. You'll save $30 with that. I will put a link in the show notes. You can always go to diabetes-connections.com. We have a Mom's Night Out tab as well there now. If you go there, we are announcing our next cities this week. I may have already done so. So follow on social for that announcement or click on over to the website, click on the Mom's Night Out tab, see the new cities. Registration is not open for them, but you can sign up to be emailed directly when registration does open and for more information. All right, I am hoping to talk to Benny for a new episode soon. As you know, he's away at college, and I cannot wait to get that kid home for winter break. As this episode goes live, I think he's coming home in about 10 days. Not that I'm counting. Diabetes, while he's been away, has been fine, but I've tried really hard not to ask him a lot about it, other than once in a while, like, you're doing okay, right? Because we don't follow his Dexcom anymore, and I really don't know much day to day. You know, he's reordered supplies with me, so I know he's doing that kind of stuff. I can't wait to talk to him more. I will let you know when we're going to be taking questions for that episode. We'll post in the Facebook group for that. These conversations you're about to hear were recorded in fall of 2016. Benny is in 6th grade. His voice hasn't even changed yet. Oh my goodness. I left in the original introduction, which gives some more context, but I also want you to know this is a much longer discussion than I remember. So I'm going to do more comprehensive show notes with some time codes if you want to kind of jump around on this episode and pick and choose where you want to listen. So here we go. My family's thoughts on 1 decade. Remember, this is 7 years ago with type 1. This part of the podcast is usually where I interview somebody else, get them to share their story and their thoughts about living with diabetes. This is different. This is my family's story. And let me tell you, this is what I've done my entire career, talk to people, interview people, since before I even graduated from college. And these are the toughest interviews I've ever done. I was so nervous, but they were wonderful. And I was just thrilled that they agreed to even talk to me. My husband and my daughter are really not front and center attention people. I don't know how they live that way. So, but here's how it's going to go. You're going to first hear from me and my husband, Slade, and then you'll hear from Leah. In the middle of that interview, I'm going to pause the conversation, and then you'll hear Leah's interview because I had maybe the most frank, honest, and open conversation about her brother's diabetes that we've ever had. And then we'll wrap that up, and you'll hear more from me and Slade, and then finally you'll hear from Benny. Oh my gosh, that kid. If you have a middle school boy, maybe you'll understand. That conversation was, let's say it was interesting. There is a bit of overlap in these conversations, as you'd expect. I mean, there are some events that we all talk about, so you'll hear about those things more than once, that sort of thing. Okay, here we go. I'm really interested to see what we talk about today because Slade doesn't really talk about Benny's diabetes publicly. I mean, of course, you're very, very involved, and you talk about it, I'm sure, with friends and things like that. But it's not like you are front and center at functions and, that kind of thing over the years.
I don't have a podcast.
I could help you set one up. But I've been told in the past I speak enough for everybody in the family. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say and if your conversation matches mine. All right, so let's start. 10 years ago, Benny was diagnosed with type 1. He was not yet 2 years old, and Leah was had just turned 5. What I remember vividly is the month before he was diagnosed when I was working at WBT doing morning radio. You got the kids every morning. So you used to text me like 7:30 or 7 o'clock every morning and say, kids are okay or off to daycare or, here's a funny picture. And you texted me one day and said, you are not going to believe the amount of pee that came out of this kid. Do you remember that? Like the mattress was soaked and the floor was wet.
I remember one morning getting him out of his crib.
Right.
And the entire mattress was soaking wet. Like everything. All the blankets were wet. The pillow was wet. The entire mattress was soaked. It was, I'm like, it didn't make any sense to me.
Right. And, me at work, I was kind of thinking, when you trade off like we did, because Slade had a restaurant for many years, so I had the kids in the afternoon and in the evening when he was working, and he had the kids every morning, because I used to do a morning radio show that started at 5 a.m. And I just remember thinking, not on my shift. Like, you got to fix that.
Which I did right away.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Drying the mattress out, trying to figure out what had happened.
But we kind of thought it was a one-off.
Oh, yeah.
Because it didn't happen again for a while.
Yeah.
And then it happened again about 3 weeks later.
Well, we noticed, I think, from that point on over the next couple of weeks that he was drinking a tremendous amount of liquid for a 18-month-old or 20-month-old. It was, and he would suck down a little 10-ounce sippy cup in 15 or 20 seconds. It was absurd.
So the mattress wetting thing was in October, I think, late October or something. And then, of course, there was Halloween, which I'm sure didn't do him any favors. That was the year the kids dressed up. It was the only matching costume we ever did. Leah was Ariel and Benny was Flounder. That was so funny. And then at Thanksgiving, we had family photos on the Friday of Thanksgiving that year.
Right.
And then we went to the Lazy Five Ranch. And I've told this story before.
Yeah, one of my brothers was here.
Right.
My brother David was there.
Right. And I posted that picture recently on Facebook of David and Benny with the giant glass of orange juice.
Right.
And then we went to the Lazy Five Ranch. And of course, Benny he was still in diapers and he was soaked and he was just laying down and he was exhausted and he felt like garbage. And then that Monday, we went to the pediatrician. That Monday, right after Thanksgiving.
Right. And, I think they did a fasting glucose and a few other things, and they thought he had a urinary tract infection. And you and I had already had suspicions that it was something more. Like, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And then it was a few days into an antibiotic for what they thought was a urinary tract infection, and there was no change. And so his outward symptoms continued to be the same, right, where he drank a tremendous amount of water and liquid and was always going to the bathroom.
Yeah. Well, on that Monday when we went to the doctor, as you said, his fasting glucose was normal. It was 80. And then they did a blood draw. They must have found something in his urine, right? They must have found sugar in his urine because I remember they did a urine test too. Although, how do you do a urine test on a kid in diapers?
No,
maybe they didn't.
I remember that we had to kind of push for them to do an A1C. Like it took a week or so.
Yeah, but we didn't ask for an A1C. We just asked for a blood test. I didn't know what we were asking for, did we? I remember you had to hold him down.
Yes, I did have to hold him down.
And Leah was in the hallway. Leah remembers that, remembers him screaming.
It wasn't exactly pleasant. No.
Poor kid. Yeah, and then they said I had a urinary tract infection. And I remember when we treated it, he seemed to feel better.
For like a day.
Right, just from the urinary, because he did have one. Yeah. But, Joe Brackus, our pediatrician friend down the street, said to me, why would a healthy 2-year-old boy have a urinary tract
Yeah,
infection.
there was no reason for that.
Keep looking.
Yeah.
So I was convinced at this point that he had contracted a fatal disease. I was on the internet. I was looking at all sorts of horrible things. I thought he had kidney cancer. I really did. I was so scared. And then he seemed to feel better. And then on Saturday they called us, and David was still here. And they called us on Saturday and said, like, it was an emergency, get to the hospital. But they didn't tell me why. Well, they did they thought they told me why, because they told me his blood sugar was like, 700, or the A1C correlated to, I don't know what it was. But I remember thinking, he's fine. He looks fine. He's doing okay. Why do we have to rush to the hospital? But we did.
Yeah, but I remember during that week that we were guessing that it might have been diabetes.
Oh, well, yeah, because most people, and, the symptoms matched perfectly.
Yeah.
But I think it was the fasting glucose being kind of normal that threw me off. And I, of course, went to worst case scenario.
Right. You definitely went deeper than I did on that. But, still concerned.
Yeah.
Not knowing. And it's a scary thing when the doctor calls and says, take your kid to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And you go, well, why? He's walking around playing with some toys. He's just fine. So, and then of course it's a crash course, right? You get admitted and 2 days later you're out and you have diabetes and have to live with that the rest of your life. So.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I forgot is when we took him to the pediatrician that first time on the Monday after Thanksgiving, when I called, we knew just enough to say he's got the symptoms of type 1. We knew that much, that the peeing and the drinking, because of all the stuff I'd done with JDRF already in Charlotte. And the pediatrician, Dr. Scott, said, I've never seen it in anybody younger than 2, but bring him in and we'll rule it out. And thankfully, they took us seriously, because I've heard some nightmare stories of people that don't. But what's funny is here we are 10 years later, almost every time I go to that pediatrician, and it's one of these big practices with like 8 doctors, they all look at Benny's chart when we go in, they say, oh, like he was the youngest one we saw at that time. And now, of course, there's lots of kids that are diagnosed younger, unfortunately. But for that practice, it was unusual. It was pretty unique.
Yeah, weird. I just distinctly remember that we had to push a little bit.
Yeah.
To get them to think in that direction.
Well, when he walked in with 80,
yeah,
they tried to figure out something else. So,
I mean, I think all that really says is, it doesn't matter what the age or what you're thinking, you have to be your own advocate. And, in some way, shape, or form, if you're not your voice, then there's an opportunity to miss something, right?
Yeah.
Not get a good look at it. So I think that, I think that not going down the rabbit hole, right, to something considerably more catastrophic and trying to rule that stuff out, you have to ask and you have to instruct and you have to, your medical team, you have to be part of the conversation, right? You can't just tell me what to do.
But it's hard too in some ways, because you don't know what you don't know. But I agree with you. We've learned this for many years now. You got to push, you got to be your own advocate, and you got to ask questions. But, if I didn't know peeing and drinking was a sign of type 1, I don't think I would have known what to ask the doctor. Right.
But I also think that I don't think doctors are offended by that. I think that helps them do what they're trained to do, is help people get better. And if you're not engaged in the conversation, it's a one-way street.
Yeah. You would hope. All right. So we're in the hospital now. And I remember he had those things. What are those things called all over you where they stick you? They're sticky things.
I had like an EKG monitor.
Right. And he kept pulling them off.
Yeah, and that couldn't have felt good. That had to hurt.
That was like when we first started using the Hulk analogy, because he was like the baby Hulk pulling everything off in the hospital.
Well, it's interesting. And he doesn't have any idea what's going on.
But that night, we took turns. You went home. I stayed. And they pretty much didn't tell us until the middle of the night that he had type 1. I think everybody thought we knew. And finally I asked if they had a diagnosis. And they said, yeah, he's got type 1 diabetes. I mean, they weren't nasty about it, but I think everybody thought someone else had told us along the way.
We didn't see Dr. Vanderwell till the second day or till the next day, right?
Yes, we went in on Saturday morning or Saturday mid-morning. We saw nurses and hospitalists. There was that one horrible woman. She came in. And she didn't say anything to us, like not hello, how are you? I'm so-and-so. She came right in and smelled him. And now I know it was for fruity breath.
Right.
She was doing, but she came and she smelled him. And, I am, of course, very calm. I said, what are you doing to my son? She kind of explained, but she kind of left. And I was like, you're not coming back in this room. I don't know what I said. I'm sure I was very nice. But yeah, that night we met the hospitalist. And that was when he said to me, who stays home with Benny? Not our endocrinologist, but just a hospitalist, a doctor who sees people in the hospital. And I was already panicking because I had my dream job and I had the health insurance. You had a restaurant. You owned a restaurant. It's not like you can untangle from that pretty easily. I'm closing the doors tomorrow.
Yeah, when we tried to untangle from it took a long time.
And I was terrified because I couldn't really quit. I wanted to quit my job, but I had the health insurance and I really didn't want to quit my job either. So he said, who stays home with Benny? And I said, nobody. Really nasty. And then I burst into tears. And you weren't there. And Benny...
I do not remember.
You were not there. It was in the middle of the night. And then Benny's awake. He's, 23 months old. He puts his arm around me. He says, it's okay, Mommy. And I was like, dude, you better get your stuff together. To myself. If your 2-year-old is comforting you, this is not how it's supposed to work. And that was a big turning point for me. And the guy was great. He said, I'm sorry. He said, what I should have said is, what's your situation? He's like, I'm just trying to help you acclimate. And he told us that he can go back to daycare, and nobody said no to us. They all tried to help us figure out how to make it work. But that moment was a big turning point for me.
I don't think I had any big turning points. I mean, the only thing that I realized was, when we finally did come home and, I went grocery shopping.
Oh my God. Wait, so hold on to that story. Let's get there. So we met Dr. V the next morning. I was Sunday, and he came in, and I remember him coming in and saying hi to us and being great, but getting right on the floor with Benny.
Yeah. And what I remember, and you have a better memory than I do, but what I remember is him saying, listen, based on where we are today with treating this, there isn't any reason he shouldn't have the exact same life he would have without diabetes that he has with diabetes.
I remember.
And that just set the tone, right?
Yeah, it really did. And I remember what I do, but I'm not even going to tell the story. It's so stupid. I will anyway. I remember my first questions to him, because what do you know about diabetes, right? Type 2. And I remember thinking and asking him, do I have to cut his toenails differently? Do I have to be careful about ingrown toenails? And he was like, oh, I could see, right? He had to take a deep breath and this lady is going to be fun. Yeah. But he got right on the floor and met Benny. And I don't think he had kids at that point.
He did not.
Yeah. And he was terrific. But I interviewed him. I said to him, I'm glad to meet you, but, I don't know anything about endocrinology or endocrinologists in this town.
Right.
And of course, I want to make sure that my child has the best. So I asked him a million questions, and he was great. He was really great.
Yeah, I just think he set the tone that said, hey, what you're going to deal with is lifelong, and that's the way it is, but it's not life-threatening.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be life-threatening.
Right. He didn't come in and tell us a cure is around the corner. He talked a little bit about the artificial pancreas, I remember, because I asked him about technology. Right. He did say that they were one of the first practices in the country that routinely gave pumps to toddlers, because this was 2006.
Right.
So that wasn't happening all over the place. And he thought that Benny, down the road we would talk about that. But he was not overly, he didn't promise anything.
No, actually, he did. He promised us that Benny would have a normal life if he took care of himself.
Right. Well, that's true.
He did make that promise.
That's true. And that was very reassuring. And he's been consistent in these 10 years. He said the 3 things that he says at almost every appointment, I'm pretty sure he told us then, which was he wants to make sure Benny can live the long, healthy life he's supposed to, that he feels good and can enjoy life right now, and that we find a way to make diabetes fit into what he wants to do and not the other way around. And we've been able to do that pretty much.
Yeah,
it's not, when people say, oh, diabetes can't stop you. I mean, some of that I shake my head at a little bit, or I raise an eyebrow, because, obviously diabetes definitely can slow you down. And there are days when it can stop you. And that's okay. I mean, you break your leg, it's going to stop you. I know it's a mindset more than a truism. But, I think we've had a pretty realistic look at it.
Yeah, I think as you go through, particularly growing up, and there's minefields everywhere, right? It's just one more minefield, right? I mean, it's something else you have to navigate, and it gets added into your routine, added into the way that you think. And it's a burden because it's different than what a lot of your peers have to deal with. is it a burden in that it can be a roadblock to accomplishing something you want to accomplish? I don't think you and I think that way. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah. We try not to. Not a dead end roadblock.
You can make it that way.
Well, it can be a roadblock that you can overcome.
Right.
But it shouldn't stop you in your tracks.
You can do a lot of woe is me.
Well, that's different.
Right. You can do a lot of woe is me, but there's a roadmap to accomplishing what you want to accomplish with diabetes.
Right. All right. Speaking of routine, let's talk about that grocery store.
That was hysterical. So, of course, when you talk about diabetes, you talk about carbs, right? And as you load your body up with carbohydrates, you need insulin.
Oh, right? And I should add, we were put on a carb counting regime or a carb counting routine immediately. We didn't do any eat to the insulin. It was all give him as many shots as you want.
Right.
And count carbs and dose him that way.
Right.
I mean, obviously at first we tried not to give him a lot of injections, but some people go on different routines at first.
Right.
We were all carb counting from the beginning.
Right. But it's really all about, the basics of understanding how to take care of yourself is you have to know what you ingest, right? You have to know what you eat, and you can give yourself insulin to help your body, right, continue to move forward and act the way it should act, right, by adding in insulin. So we're like, maybe we should really go low carb or no carb. So I went to the grocery store. I think I spent 2.5 hours.
That's what I was going to say. It was definitely 2 hours.
And I think I know the label of every item in the grocery store. But I just went and bought everything that was low carb, and he came home and put it in the cupboards and put it in the refrigerator, and he loved some of the food and fed it to him for a few days and then realized we were feeding him fat.
Yeah, we did 2 weeks almost of Atkins, basically. Yeah. And I lost about 6 pounds. It was awesome. I'm sure that had nothing to do with being nervous or being crazy. But yeah, I mean, we went from eating everything in moderation and pretty healthy. I mean, our kids were 5 and almost 2. Yeah. It's not like they were drinking soda and going to McDonald's all the time. But we were eating things like oatmeal for breakfast and pancakes and stuff. Right. And we went to eating sausage and it was ridiculous. Like everything was meat and cheese.
Yeah, it was a lot of meat and a lot of cheese. And we realized we're just eating fat and we're going to kill him. So after a couple of weeks, I actually threw a bunch of that stuff out.
The turning point for me, or the final straw, was when you were like, how about pork rinds? That's a good snack. He's 2 and we're Jewish. I mean, we don't keep kosher, but
I don't remember that.
Pork rinds was stuff. I was like, I know many people enjoy pork rinds. I'm not one of them.
I don't remember
I bet he would love them now.
Yeah, you can.
We did find some things. I mean, olives, beef jerky, cheese sticks, all those
I
things.
do remember kind of throwing it out and go, that's it. We're just going to we're going to feed him the way we would normally feed him. And we will treat him medically the way that we are given the tools to do it. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. And we also counted every carb, tried to do it exactly. I think the whole thing we figured added 2 hours of routine to our day. Because we had a yellow legal pad, right? We wrote everything down. We wrote all the food, the dosage, the routine. But we were counting carbs in ketchup and green peas and, I mean, everything, because that's what we were told to do.
Right.
And I remember going for a follow-up. When do you go for your first follow-up? 2 months later? 1 month later?
I think it was a month.
And Dr. V was like, really? This is excellent, but you do not need to do the 2 carbs that are in the ketchup. I mean,
I still think actually that's kind of important because you need to understand that it's out there. There are carbs you're ingesting.
Well, we needed to do it then to learn.
Yeah. And that's what happens is you learn, kind of what carbs are, where they are, where they're hidden, how your body reacts to them, particularly how Benny's body reacts to them. And then it's really kind of an art at that point, right? It's not really a science. I mean, there's all kinds of ratios and logarithms and all that stuff, but it really comes down to everyone's body is a little different. It's much more like juggling, right, than it is like anything else.
I'm going to pause my talk with Slade here and bring in our daughter, Leah. She's 3 years older than Benny, 4 years ahead in school because of where their birthdays fall, and about 40 years older in maturity right now. Is it okay to say that? I was so happy she agreed to talk to me about this. And this might be the best discussion we've had about her brother and diabetes. I will say, I remember a few things a little differently, but this is her story. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. When I talked to Dad, we talked about when Benny was first diagnosed. And one of the things that I brought up was when we had to take that first blood draw, you were outside of the doctor's office. Do you remember that?
No, I remember the electrodes, and him always pulling them off, but I don't remember the blood draw.
Yeah, because you went to the pediatrician's office with us.
Yeah.
And he was screaming his head off, and you were in the hallway like, what? Because you just turned 5.
Oh, I think I do remember I was playing with my leapfrog, and I was sitting out in the hallway, and I was like, I would hear screaming, but I'd be like, oh, whatever, it's fine. I'm going to play my game.
And then we went, when Benny was in the hospital, you remember the electrodes, and Uncle David was with us.
That was funny. I mean, because I didn't understand what was going on, so it was funny because he had electrodes all over him, and he would just, like, pull them off so they couldn't do anything. And, I mean, he was crying, and, like, you were very frustrated, and I'm just laughing because I had no idea what was going on.
And then the next day we actually went ice skating. It was our community ice skating thing when we were making the temple. It was, like, our first time that we went to the ice skating rink uptown.
Did the rabbi go?
I don't think we had the rabbi yet.
Oh.
It was just us. And you were very little. Okay, so you remember. Okay, so what do you remember, like, what kind of things do you remember from when you were little?
I remember very general stuff. I don't really remember, like, specific instances. Like, when he was first diagnosed, I didn't think anything was wrong, but apparently he was, like, drinking too much and peeing too much. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. Because I was not the biggest fan of my little brother. And I remember as he got older, and I think it was I was less of, like, a small child and more of, like, preteen. I was very upset because he'd always get so much attention, which now it's like, you get it because it's an awful, horrible thing and blah, blah, blah. He needs all this stuff. But as a small child, it was like, pay attention to me, mother. I exist too. You have a second child who was actually your first child. But, you know, it was cool. I was an only child for 4 years, which was a wonderful thing.
It was like almost 3 years.
It was 4.
It was 3.
It was like 4. It's like almost 4.
It was almost 3.
It was
3. You turned 3 in November.
Oh, whatever.
And then he was born.
It's the same thing.
Okay, very similar. What I remember a lot of when you were very little is you were a big helper. Like when he was first born, you would help me with the baby, you would help with diapers, you would read to him every night, until you got sick of him, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the same thing with diabetes. You wanted to learn how to do everything. You guys would give shots to the stuffed animals.
Oh, yeah.
And do
we had the little bear, and there were, like, little patches on it.
Yeah, that's Rufus, the bear with
Rufus.
diabetes.
Oh, that's fun. That's nice.
And, right, so you would do that. But you were very helpful to me in the backseat of the car. Because when you have a kid in a baby seat, basically, right, he was in a front-facing, I don't remember what the requirements were now, but, like, you had the 3-point harness, the 5-point harness, those kinds of chairs. And so you were next to him, and if he was low, you actually checked him once or twice for me when you were like 5 or 6 years old. You did.
No.
And then, yes. And then but not often. But you were very responsible, and you were like, I'll do it. Usually I would pull over if I needed to, like if Dad wasn't with us. I mean, I wasn't making you do it, but you did it once or twice. But you were always willing and helping me give him juice boxes and stuff like that.
So much has changed. Oh.
But then as you got older, like you said, it became more of a why him, why are you giving him all the attention kind of thing.
Well, because until now, I never really fully understood why he got so much of the attention. It was always just, like, you spent so much time, like, talking to him, talking about him, like, calling people about it, and just, you had, like, Lantis and Humalog, whatever all that stuff is, just words that I hear around the house, but you had all of these packages shipped, like, every couple of months, or, like, whatever, or you would go to these conventions and the walks, and it was just like, what about me? Where's my walk? Where's the Leah walk?
Do you think we should have done a better job educating you about diabetes? Because I feel like we did tell you.
No, it's not that I didn't really understand what it was. It was just that, like, I was a child, and I still am a child, but it's like, pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. It wasn't that I didn't know that it was some awful thing that he, like, needed to have all this attention, because I knew that. It was just like, why can't I also have attention? It wasn't like I was trying to take it away from him. It was just like, me too. Same.
What would your advice be to parents listening to this who have a kid with type 1 and other kids who don't in the family?
Well, you certainly don't have to, you shouldn't, like, take attention away from a child with diabetes just because one of your other children is feeling a little, like, left out. But that doesn't mean that you can totally ignore that child because they're still, like, they're your child. They're there. They need you. But I think it would be better if you, like, if someone explained to me that, like, if you had, like, sat me down and with Benny and been like, this is what's happening, blah, 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 this is why we give him so much attention, it's not that we don't love you, and just something like that. And sure, I probably still would have complained, but whatever. Like, it's fine.
So, like, the little things that we tried to do, like weekends away, or just you and me stuff, like, that helps,
like,
right?
spending a weekend with my dad or with my mom, would, like, that's great. Because it shows that, like, sure, you spend basically every second of every day worrying about this other kid, but you still have time for me, which is pretty awesome. So,
tell me about camp a little bit, because this is something that you and Benny share that you do not really share with me and your dad. I don't know if you remember, but you used to come home from camp. This is the regular summer camp, sleep away for about a month, and tell Benny, it's going to be so great. You're going to love it. You know, can't wait till you would go. And I would always think, there's no way. There's no way. And you were ready to go when you were 8. And when he was 8, I was not ready for him to go, but we sent him anyway. Why? Do you remember why you wanted him to go? Did you just think he would have fun?
Well, I mean, when he first went, what unit, like, how old was I when he first went?
Well, he was boning 1, so you would have been 3 years older than that. I don't know. I can never keep track of those things.
Well, he was, like, 8 when he went.
He was 8.
So I would have been, like, 11.
Yeah.
So at 11, it was still very much, like, because of the fact that he's had diabetes and we've known for so long, it's just kind of part of our lives, and I don't think of it as, like, this huge deal. Like, it's just something that he just has to deal with, and it's like, whatever. Because he's a normal kid. It's not like some other things that people can get where, like, you see, like, what you see the symptoms or you see, like, the damage that it does. It's just sort of something that you have to deal with, and it's just, like, whatever. So, I mean, it never even occurred to me that, like, he wouldn't go to a sleepaway camp, because that was just like, oh yeah, it's like, Andy has diabetes. It's like, he's got brown eyes, he's got diabetes. Like, whatever. So, I mean, plus it was just, like, such a fun place to, like, to go and to get away. And it was, like, you get to do so much there that you don't really get to do at home. And it was never about him, like, oh my gosh, he's my brother, I love him so much, I want him to come to camp. It was like, I want you to experience this wonderful place. But it was never about the diabetes. It was just about him wanting to, like, go. I
don't think he ever would have gone if you hadn't been so excited about it, because that was part of the reason I wanted him to go, because you liked it so much.
No, it was wonderful.
Yeah, he really has a good time there. I mean, I'm so glad you had such a great experience too.
Well, sorry, I had to take my place for a minute.
Okay,
it's okay.
All right, so that's
okay. I can't go anymore.
Yeah, you're too old for a camp now. That stinks.
I know, but I can go back this summer if I wanted to.
Next summer.
Yeah. But I don't think I would. I might be a counselor.
Be a counselor and keep your brother in line. Although you'd be a different side of the camp. Okay. Since Benny was diagnosed, I know you've met other kids with type 1, but you don't come to conferences much, so it's not like this is it's a type 1 atmosphere, other than the walks and things. Do you feel that, first of all, have you ever talked with someone? I don't know how I'm going to even ask this question, but, like, do you feel like knowing about Benny's diabetes has maybe helped you get to know other kids with type 1 better?
Not really. I mean, most of the people that I talk to, like, kids my age or adults or kids Benny's age, it's always, like, that's just sort of a thing that we both know about them, that they have diabetes, and the most that we would ever talk about is, like, if they were low or if, like, they had to bolus for something, and it would never be, like, a big deal, and most of the time we would just talk about, like, other things, just because, I mean, for me, I'm just so used to my brother having it, and for them, they have it, so they just kind of have to be used to it. So neither of us ever make a big deal out of it, and it's just kind of like, whatever.
It would be kind of weird for a teenager to be like, so tell me about your type 1 diabetes. Like, how would you bring that up?
You wouldn't. I mean, you can certainly have a conversation with somebody else about it if you don't have it yourself. But, I mean, unless you're very new to what diabetes is, it's generally not a big deal. Like, if you're talking to somebody who has diabetes, you generally know they have diabetes, and that's why you're talking to each other. So it's never really like a major point of discussion, if that makes any sense.
Got it. Did you ever have a moment where you were scared with Benny?
It was like 5 minutes where you first showed me an EpiPen, like in case he got like really low.
Oh, the glucagon.
The glucagon. It's an EpiPen.
It's not an EpiPen, but it's okay. But it looks like an EpiPen.
It's the same thing.
Okay.
It does the same thing. And I remember like you came up and you showed me, and it was like this big red needle or whatever. I'd never seen anything like it. And you're like, and you explain the whole thing to me, like, if Benny gets really low, or if this happens, or if he passes out, you have to stab him in the thigh with this giant needle. Like, if nobody else is around, you have to do it, or he's gonna die. And how old was I? Like 9?
5. No, I don't remember. I'm kidding. I don't remember having that conversation.
But it was before I turned 10. I remember this. And I was just like, what on earth is this? You want me to stab my brother if he's like lying on the ground? And you're like keeping it in a cabinet downstairs. And it's like, what is this? But I mean, other than that, it's pretty much been totally normal.
And it's funny because some of our babysitters we found because of diabetes, and you've wound up being really good friends with them, which is pretty cool as you've gotten older.
Yeah. But it was never because of their diabetes. It was just like, oh, you know how to take care of yourself. You can take care of our child. And
well, it was
like,
for us. It
cool.
was for you. It had nothing to do with it. What do you care if they had diabetes? It was just one of those things that we just fell into we found great people. And, like our neighbor Christina, who was diagnosed as a young adult, and now she's a family friend, which is really nice.
She's pretty awesome.
She is pretty awesome.
Their whole family's pretty awesome.
Do you worry about Benny growing up with diabetes or being an adult with diabetes now? Have you ever even thought about it?
I'm not worried for him. Not with him being able to take care of himself, because he's totally capable. I'm just worried about, like, what other people might say about it, because people, when you hear diabetes, you think of, like, generally what people think of diabetes, they think of as normally type 2, which you can get, which is, like, generally related to, like, obesity or just being overweight and not healthy. But he has type 1, which is totally different. And I don't know. Kids are mean. I mean, really, kids are mean. And I don't know. I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about everybody else and what they're going to say to him.
But you'll beat them up if they're mean to him.
Of course.
Excellent. All right, let me just make sure before we stop. People had questions. I think they were mostly for Benny, but somebody did ask
I'm
me.
offended.
Well, do
Ask me questions,
He gets
too.
all the attention.
I know. Isn't it great?
All right, let's see. I edited all this crap.
It's okay to complain about your sibling getting all the attention.
I think that's a great point. Definitely it's okay to complain. Better than seething.
Seething. Don't hate your parents. They're just trying to keep your other sibling alive.
Oh, Anne asked these questions. I would love your daughter's perspective. Did it cause her to be jealous, attention seeking, and how does it feel to have to worry about him? Or do you worry about him?
Well, I'm going to go with the second part on this because I feel like I've already addressed, like, the first part of this question. But I don't really worry about him, like, at all. It's always... I know you and Dad worry about him all the time because it's like, what if he's not bolusing? What if he's really high? Like, what's going on? But I'm just like, whatever. He can take care of himself. You won't let him die. It's okay. There's a hospital down the road. He'll be fine. I mean, I probably should worry just a little bit more than I do. But it's part of my life. It's part of his life. It's something we have to deal with.
Well, I think what we tried to do was to make you aware, but not to make it your responsibility. I just never felt like it was your responsibility as a kid. Everybody, I don't know if you remember when he got on the bus. He was in kindergarten, so you were in 4th grade? And a lot of people said to me, oh, well, what a relief that he's on the bus, because even though you can't be with him, Leah's there and she can take care of him.
Oh, great.
And I never felt, what I told you at the time was, you don't have to worry about his diabetes. Just take care of him as a sister and brother should take care of each other. We told him that too. Like, if somebody's picking on you, he needs to stand up for you, vice versa. If you get sick, he needs to holler for help. It's just that kind of stuff. It was never diabetes specific. And I know you guys looked out for each other all the time.
Of course.
But didn't you sit next to each other all through elementary school?
No, for 1 grade. I think.
Did you really sit next to him? I was kidding.
No, I think it was. No, I remember because I was in, like, 4th grade, so I was like slowly, like, in the cool part in, like, the back of the bus, and I was really excited about it because, like, me and all my friends, we sat in, like, the very back, and it was like, oh my gosh, we're so cool. We sit in the back of the bus, but the bus driver, Benny was in, like, second grade or like
No.
first grade.
I remember this. This was in kindergarten when he first started going to school. They
Yeah.
made you sit together.
Yeah, he sat in the very front row.
Right, they were terrified.
Right behind the bus driver
I
because they were
forgot
like,
all about that.
what if he like passes out? What if he goes totally insane? What if he doesn't have any food? And so they made me sit with him because I was his sister and like I knew that like,
you
he
were
had
older.
diabetes and I knew what was going on and I could like call like my mom because I knew your phone number. And I was very upset.
But you did that for like a week or two
and then
before
I was
you
like-
even told us.
Yeah, and then I was like, and then no.
Yeah, and then you're like, Mom, we need to address this.
We have an issue.
That's great. I forgot all about that. And he was happy to see you go too. And I know you were happy.
We were
to
both
go.
like, go away. Like, get away from me. Because my brother, like, he couldn't talk to anybody else on the bus because they're like, why is your sister with you? Or it was like really awkward because like, he was like in kindergarten and I was like a cool fourth grader. Not really. And so, and I was just upset because I was like, I want to go sit with my friends and I don't want to sit with my little brother. Like, ew.
And on that note, thank you so much, sweetie. This was great.
Oh, no problem.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
I am so proud of her, even though I was biting my tongue a bit. I mean, we explained diabetes a lot with her. I am sure you know that, you know. And yes, she knows an EpiPen and glucagon are not the same thing. But wow, that was nice for me. That was really great to talk to Leah. All right, let's go back to me and Slade. And when we left off, we were starting to talk about how we try to make diabetes fit into our life rather than making life revolve around diabetes. Before we left the hospital, though, we had a long planned event with our congregation. That year, that summer, we had also decided to help start our temple, right? I mean, that was the same summer. That was that summer, and then this winter this happened. But we had an ice skating. I had planned an ice skating event in downtown Charlotte for the Sunday, the day after Benny was diagnosed. So we were still in the hospital, and we talked about it, and you said you should go. Right? And I should take Leah. Yeah. And so you went to the hospital that day. We traded off. And I took Leah to the ice skating rink. And I was really nervous. And I was really kind of upset about leaving him in the hospital. I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad I did that because it showed her that life goes on. It kind of convinced me that life goes on. It was a great, fun event. And our friends and our community were amazing. They were just amazing. They were so supportive of me. And they made sure we had fun. It was great. I'm so glad we did that. That was cool.
Yeah, I think that kind of set the, or maybe not on purpose, but kind of set the tone for how we're trying to normalize. We work really hard at normalizing our lives. In fact, we live our lives first and treat diabetes second almost, right? Because it's just part of what you have to do. It's kind of like you have to put your shoes on if you're going to go outside, right? So you have to treat your diabetes whenever you're out and about. So, but I think that kind of set the tone for it, right? Yeah. I mean, because you can get into a dark place if you don't.
Well, and Dr. V also told us probably that day or the next day, don't buy him a pony for checking his blood sugar.
Right.
Like, don't reward him unduly because this is not going away.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know.
Although I think you started looking at ponies.
I was looking at Porsches. I was looking at everything. Yep. Oh, it's really funny. You know, it's interesting too when you talk about life goes on. I think we put him back in daycare, right? 3 days later.
Well, we were very fortunate. I don't know, was it 3 days?
It was very soon.
Probably within a week.
Yeah, we were lucky.
But we were very fortunate in that the people who were the managers at the daycare center had some experience and then took it upon themselves to go and get more training.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So we were really fortunate, but that wasn't common then. It was only 10 years ago. It wasn't common, but it's very common now. So I think the challenges that people have about daycare they're much easier barriers now than when even just 10 years ago.
I would say that there are more resources to help, but I think that daycare is a huge challenge for a lot of people. You don't know how lucky we were.
Well, no, I don't disagree that it's a huge challenge, but there are more and more kids that are diagnosed that come through the doors of daycare centers, and they are their experience level is much higher than it was 10 years ago.
Well, what happened with us was there was a family right before us with a little girl, and the mom was a teacher and a nurse. It was crazy. So she had made a whole guidebook for them and came in and trained a few people. And so when we brought Benny, they knew more than we did. I wanted him to sleep there.
They kind of did know more than we did.
And Rebecca, who was the manager, who really just became part of the family after a while. Yeah. And one or two of the teachers, as you said, they did more training. I sent them to one of the JDRF training days, and they learned along with us. They were absolutely amazing. Then that little girl moved. She was like 3 days after we came back from the hospital, so they weren't even there. And then the other thing I remember, I should probably stay chronological, but I'll skip ahead. We had a planned trip with my friends, my college roommate, with Beth and Dave, to Las Vegas.
Yeah. But, back to the daycare thing, I think the key to that is, and it's kind of the way we've always dealt with it, is our objective is when we put our son in the care of somebody else, particularly early on, our objective was to make them feel as comfortable and as confident as possible that they could take care of them. We didn't put pressure on them to say, we're worried you're not going to be able to, or we were scared parents. We let them know that, if you have to dial 911, you dial 911. It's okay. You do the best that you can with the tools that we're giving you and the tools that you have. And I think that's a hard hurdle for people to get over. But I think if you get over that, you get a lot more help, right? And you get a lot more people who, when your child is in their care, that they feel confident. We all know that feeling confident, no matter what you're doing, helps you perform better. So we really worked hard at trying to instill confidence in the people that were at times across the years taking care of our son.
I think we were also the beneficiaries in a weird way of less or no social media. You're not on Facebook a ton, and you're not in all these diabetes groups. But I think if I had been when Benny was diagnosed, my outlook might be different, because some of them have thousands and thousands of people in them, and everybody's experience is different. And you know how it is on Facebook. You only see the best and the worst. And people post a lot of nightmare stories that other people assume are the norm, and they're not. And I think I would have been more frightened. I would have loved the support. I mean, we had nobody up here for the first couple of years. We didn't know anybody. But I think that has added to, I don't want to do a whole thing on social media here, but I think that has added to some of the fear.
Listen, I think that, and because social media wasn't as prevalent as it is now, it's the same thing, right? You believe half of what you hear and less of what you read, right? I mean, you have to make decisions based on your own experiences, and it's okay to view other experiences and see how they might influence what you're doing. But you can't say it happened to that person, so it's going to happen to me.
Exactly. And I will say, he was great. I mean, he had highs, he had lows. He was always safe and happy, which, as you know, if you listen, that's my goal. It's not perfect, but safe and happy. And the one time he went to the hospital was when he got his thumb caught in a door. Remember, he had that green,
I mean, he did the same
bandage.
things other people do at daycare. They get hurt falling down, somebody throw a block at his head, right? I mean, it's the same kind of stuff.
He needed stitches. That was the one thing. Yeah. And I was so nervous because that wasn't too long after diagnosis, maybe a couple months. And I was so nervous because I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we going to manage diabetes? It was fine. It was fine.
It was easy.
Yeah, it was easy. So the next big thing that happened in terms of Life Goes On was we went to Las Vegas with my college roommate. Right. And I called my mom because she was going to come watch the kids. And my parents live in Florida. And I said, I don't know if we should do this. Should we stay? And Life goes on. You have to go. You have to go, she said. This is not, I'll do it. I'll do it. So as we started talking about it, she said, but I can't give him a shot.
I got it, but I'm not going to give him a shot.
And you know what? I think she would have if she had to.
Of course she would have.
Right?
Yeah.
But we were very fortunate. One of the girls from daycare who was, she was trained to be a nurse, right? She was a nursing student. Kristen.
She was.
So she came over. I'm not sure if she stayed here. But she came over and did all the insulin for the weekend. And, and Mom called us a ton. We were in, was it the Aladdin? It was the end of the Aladdin, right? Because they...
Yeah, it wasn't the... Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, they were tearing it down.
They were tearing down around us. Yeah. And so I remember distinctly taking a call from her and getting in the elevator on the Aladdin and losing the call. And then she called me back. But we made it. But we had a great time.
Was that before the show we went to?
What show?
The show when David...
No, that was months after. The show was the following weekend.
That's what I thought.
You tell that story. Okay, so
I don't know. You tell the story.
I'll tell the story. So 1 week after diagnosis, we're so fortunate. My brother-in-law, David, Slade's brother. Slade has 4 older brothers, and David is the closest in age to him. So David was staying with us for like a month after Thanksgiving. It was great. He was in between jobs, and he's so close to my kids. It was wonderful. Unfortunately for him, he was here for diagnosis. So we had tickets to Spamalot, me and you, that following weekend.
That's right.
So again, David's like, go, I've got it. I mean, David knew just as much as we did at that point.
Yeah.
So we get 3 numbers into Spamalot.
I don't even know if it was that deep.
I think we saw The Lady of the Lake. I don't know where that is, or maybe I made it up. And it was, and the phone rings. So you go out to take the call. And 15 minutes later, it wasn't because I saw 3 numbers. I think you saw like half of the first one. And I went out to see what was going on. And he thought, when you think about how you dose a little kid, he was 27 pounds. He was 23 months old, and he got like little puffs of insulin. But we were using syringes.
Right.
So he would get like a quarter of a unit, or you tried to estimate a half a unit. And I think he was supposed to get a half a unit, and David gave him 6 units or something like that.
Yeah.
Or 2 units. He couldn't have taken 2 units. I mean, he had this tiny little dose, and David thought he gave him 4 times as much.
Right.
So we couldn't figure it out. So we just said, forget it. We went home. Actually,
we were on our way home. We were driving home, and he had it under... We never stopped home, did we?
Yes, of course we came home.
Okay.
We didn't come home?
I thought we went right to the Nat's house.
Okay, so but what happened is we checked or he checked. Isn't that funny? I can't remember either. We're getting old, honey. So he checked or we checked, and his blood sugar never fell.
Right.
He was perfectly fine. He was like, I'll make it up. He was like 150 all night. I mean, never fell. So he couldn't have possibly... He either did the injection wrong, or he never miscalculated.
Right.
Or Benny snuck a pizza in the middle of the night that we didn't know about. And so we were on our way home.
Right.
And a friend of ours had a holiday party going on that night. We're like, we'll just go there.
It was fine. So, we left the show early, right? I mean,
Right.
We're 20 minutes into the show. We left. We're driving home, talking back and forth with David, and realized he was fine. So we kept going, went by the house, and went to a friend's holiday party.
We're terrible parents.
No, we're not.
I don't think we're terrible parents either. That's really funny. Yeah, and we never saw Spamalot.
No.
I still haven't seen it.
I may not want to.
I don't know if I could go see it.
Oh, bring Benny.
All right. I promise we won't go year by year, day by day through the 10 years. But just a couple of quick things about the beginning. Look, he gave me such a look. Like, are you sure?
I don't have a good enough memory to do that, please.
Benny got his insulin pump. We talked about that with Dr. V right from the beginning. And he got his pump. We went to our educator, to Lynette.
Right.
And we said, I remember saying, give me the one that's easiest for me to use and will be the best for him. Because I was really scared of how complicated it was going to be. And we wound up with the Animus 2020, which is what they had back then. And I showed it to Benny, and he threw it across the room the first night.
He took it out of your hand and chucked it.
I thought, maybe this won't work out so well. But he was 2.5. We kind of explained to him what the deal was. And, this will be a big shot every 3 days, but not all the shots in between. And by that time, he didn't care. You could give him a shot.
He would just stick his arm up. It was like, shot. He'd raise his arm. He'd give him the shot. He'd put his arm down.
He didn't care at all at that point. He was so good and so used to it. But that night when he had the pump, because we had the saline trial for a couple of days, I said, do you want to, I didn't know I was going to sleep in it. So I kind of said, do you want me to take it off? And he said, no, mine. And that was it. He loved it. He wouldn't give it up after that. So that was really good. And we had a little trouble with the very first inset we ever did. We hit a capillary. There was a lot of blood, remember? And then we weren't sure if it was going to work. And we, like geniuses, we decided we were going to go away to start the pump. So we went to my parents' house. Remember, this was in the summer. So I went to my parents' house for a week because when you start an insulin pump, and they probably still do this now, you have to check every 3 hours around the clock for the first couple of days to get the levels, close to right. I thought, I'll stay with my mom. My parents spent the summers in New York at that point. I'll spend the week in New York, and then my mom can spot me with the kids. It'll be great. I'll sleep when I sleep. And you had a golf tournament with Bill.
In Vermont.
And I said, go, I can do this. Go ahead. I'm fine. I'll be with my parents. So I remember thinking when we first had that bad inset, I'm not even going to get on the plane. This is not working. And I remember we changed it, and he was we checked him right before we got in the car to go to the airport. And luckily it was fine. So I was much calmer. We were crazy to do this way.
Well, and I remember I was in Vermont, and I think I was supposed to pack up the diabetes supplies.
I don't know, but I think I was supposed to. Yes, you packed all the diabetes supplies. And for the record, Slade is fastidious. He is an excellent packer. Usually what happens is I put out clothing and then you pack it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really, I would trust him more than myself in terms of remembering things. So I'll give you that much credit.
Yeah, well.
But you blew this one.
Well, I forgot to add the cartridges that you refill and then put back in the pump. And I'm in Vermont, and you were scrambling. We were on the phone. You were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. And Bill had a good friend whose son had type 1, and he was on a pump. We had no idea if it was the same pump or anything, but he calls him at 8:00 at night. We go to his house. He gives us a couple of cartridges. I mean, it was really, and we were ready to drive back to Manhattan, or back to New York to bring it to you, and you guys had figured out another way to
but that's really funny because again, before Facebook, I probably could have put out a message and said, does anybody have this within 30 miles? And somebody would have helped me out.
Right.
So what happened was we went to change the cartridge, and I'm all proud of myself because I've got it all laid out and I'm calm. And so we had a good start to the pump. We didn't need a lot of adjusting. For whatever reason, the dosing worked out pretty easily, pretty quickly. So when I went to change the cartridge, I was feeling maybe overconfident. So I had everything all spread out on the table.
You didn't have everything.
Right. And I realized, where are the cartridges? Where are the cartridges? So I called our endocrinology office, and I called our educator. And the endocrinologist called back first and said, you need a Lure Lock needle. And what the heck? And you can't get it at a pharmacy. So my dad's gone. I'm going to the hospital. And he goes to get the Lure Lock needle. So you can screw it onto the cartridge. And I had insulin. I had an insulin vial. So then Lynette, our educator, calls me back. She says, we're going to MacGyver this thing. And she teaches me over the phone how to, open up the cartridge, how to make sure that you have enough space in it. And then we just injected the insulin in it with a regular needle. So she was really helpful, and she was so happy to do it. She was fantastic. I also had called Animus.
Right.
And they couldn't do anything that night. But the next morning, they came to my mom's house in rural Westchester County, which if you're not familiar with Westchester County, they're just old. He's laughing that I said rural Westchester County. It is. What is it? It's not there are farms there. I mean, they're Ralph Lauren owns a farm. But what I mean is they're tiny roads. They're not well marked. I can't say that.
It's like any other street. It has your house has a number and a street name.
I find it to be very confusing.
It wasn't like it was unmarked land in rural Westchester County.
They fought with machetes to get to my mother's house. I was impressed that they came over the next morning and they gave me different cartridges, different samples. They were great. The local rep came out. So that I was, I'm forever grateful for that. And God bless my dad. He found that Lure Lock needle, which we never used, and I carried for years. I probably still have it in the cabinet.
And we were in the car ready to drive.
Yeah.
We picked up the cartridges, and we were on our way.
You want credit for that, right?
Well, I just want to say that we were in on the conversation, and we didn't just ignore that something was happening.
Bye, honey. You're on your own. But I'll tell you what I learned from that. I always, I never like when mistakes are made, but that's when you learn that you can do anything, right? Because you just need help. You need to stay calm. I'm sure I was totally calm. And, you get through it. And I realized that, we could do this. We could be okay. We always could have given him a shot.
Right. I mean, that was always an option. It's still an option now. I mean, still sometimes today he'll take a shot.
Yeah. Yeah. But for years he was terrified. After he started the pump, it was amazing. He got frightened of injections very quickly.
Yeah.
And
he started to recognize what they were. When he was 19 months old, he didn't know.
Yeah.
First couple ones are oh, and then after that, he would just stick his hand up in the air. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah, that was funny. Because he didn't want to stop what he was doing.
Yeah.
Gosh.
You'd be eating with one hand, you're giving him a shot in the other hand.
Well, in the other arm.
In the other arm.
He's ambidextrous, which helped with a lot of things, because you could check his blood sugar, as long as he didn't have to stop playing.
Right.
Although, you know what I didn't mention that I should? The first week, almost the first 2 weeks, I always say it was crying, sweating, running. Because he did not like injections for those first 2 weeks. And I just remember being heartbroken every time I had to do it. He would cry and we had to hold him. It was awful.
There was a bit of holding him down.
I was so sweaty. It was it was stress sweat.
The the insets were holding him down. We did it in his butt. So
No. The injections, though, the first injections, and then the insets were the same way. Yeah, he still doesn't. The insets are still scary to him. 10 years later, I think it's just but he does it himself. I mean, he does it. It's just one of the more stressful parts. You can say whatever you're thinking, giving me a smirk.
His mother might baby him a little bit.
Just a little bit. Well, you know what? And let's talk about that, because I think we're a really good team. I baby both kids for sure. I definitely baby Benny when it comes to diabetes. I will change his cartridge. I will check his blood sugar, whatever. And you do it yourself. You're on your own. I think it's a good balance. I know he can do it when he's away from me. We don't have to have it out, because I know you disagree. But I think that's healthy. A lot of people feel the same way.
Well, I don't know if I can classify it as healthy or unhealthy. I would just say that, listen, at some point, you're not going to be there. I'm not going to be there, And yeah, he has great moments where he does a great job of paying attention and taking care of himself. But the sooner he does that, the better. So plus it's part of the way I was brought up. I was brought up much more independently, where whatever I had to face personally, I had to face, right? So we're a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to that.
We were brought up pretty differently. I mean, loving parents, great families, slightly different parenting styles, and 5 boys versus 2 girls.
Yeah. I just think he needs to take care of it himself, and he will find a way to do as little as possible. But that might just be a 12-year-old kid.
I think a lot of it is. But I'm definitely willing to admit that I baby him. I think, though, if I didn't feel that he could do it, that I would feel differently. So let's talk about some of those milestones, because we're not going to go 10 years year by year by year. But going to kindergarten, to me, when Benny started kindergarten, was stressful for me. I was really worried about it. But he was the only kid with type 1 in the school at the time. And we had to go to school. We had to look at the routine. We had to figure out what he was going to do. And it worked out really well. There were some bumps, but every year we would go and talk to the teacher, talk to the nurse. We only had a part-time nurse every year.
Yeah, but I think the key there again was we presented the situation in a way where we would try to instill as much confidence in the people that were going to have to take care of him. That the principal bought in, the teachers bought in. We didn't make them feel like, hey, you have our child's life in your hands, and if you mess it up, right? We just empowered them to feel confident about it. And I think that makes a huge difference. It continues to make a huge difference.
We were also adamant with Benny that he learned. I remember telling him in preschool, the year before kindergarten, when you go to kindergarten, big kids check their blood sugar themselves. Right. And he was doing everything himself when he went to kindergarten, obviously needing adult supervision, obviously with someone looking over his shoulder. But from kindergarten on, when he was in school, he did it himself. Oh,
I think from the time he was probably, I would even say maybe as early as 8, he could do everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, 4th grade, they barely looked over his shoulder.
But, I mean, he could do everything from fill a cartridge, restart his pump, calibrate.
Yeah.
He could do it all.
Yeah.
So.
Well, diabetes camp was a big part of that, too.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew how to do it all, but I think wanting to do it and be more independent, and especially with insets, that came with diabetes camp.
Right.
And that's a funny story, because Benny went to, we have a little diabetes day camp around here that he went to when he was 3 or 4 years old. And then the year he was turning 7, they said, oh, you're going to go to the sleepaway camp. And he was like, yeah, I'm all for it. Well, it turns out you have to be 8. Right. To go to that camp. So I called them up and they said, oh, we thought he was older. Because he's a big kid. He always looked older. I said, well, can we send him anyway? Because he was ready to go.
Yeah.
And they make exceptions. So they sent him. And that was the best. I mean, it really has given him a great community.
Because now he goes to regular camp.
And now he goes to regular camp. Well, that was the next year. He went to diabetes camp for 1 year. Yep. And our daughter, I've told this story before, our daughter has gone to regular camp, sleepaway camp for 4 weeks for a long time. And she would come home every summer and say, Benny, it's going to be great when you're 8 and you can come. And I was always like, no, he's never going. He's not going to go. But he went. We worked it out. We started working with the camp in January. He went in July.
Right.
And the camp has a medical facility. They have doctors and nurses. They're not trained in diabetes, but that I don't think I would be comfortable sending him for that long without that there. But while he's at camp, he does everything himself.
Yeah.
And sometimes he messes up. and sometimes he doesn't. So that's, you always have to hold my hand. The first 2 or 3 days of sleepaway camp, I'm always like, why did I send him? I'm so selfish. I can't believe it. I just both of them. But he always does fine. They called me once. They called me the first. They were like, hello? Yes. I have a question about Benny. And I'm like ready to throw up. Yes. What kind of deodorant does he use at home? Why do he have like a little rash under his arm? I thought he was like in the hospital with TKA.
Well, all of those moments and pieces of experience that allowed him to be more independent have just been really good.
Yeah.
Right?
Elementary school went really well. He was really in a groove, except for like some travel and some summers and some incidents.
I thought we weren't going year by year.
We're not, but I just want to mention where we are now. Let me lead you here. I'm the professional interviewer.
Lead me.
I would say that so far middle school has been a little bit of a challenge.
There's a lot more distractions.
Yeah, it's a huge school. And the hormones are going bananas. So the insulin levels are going bananas. I would give him so much insulin right now. Gives himself so much insulin. And, it's been a challenging transition. How's that?
I think all transitions are challenging, right? It's a greater level of independence, a greater level of understanding, and he's got to care, right? And it's easy to get distracted. He's a 12-year-old boy. It's even easier to get distracted, right? So it's not like he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Put in under pressure, he could do whatever he had to do to take care of himself. But if he knows he doesn't have to think about it, he doesn't think about it.
So I opened this up to some of my Facebook friends to see if they had any questions for us in our wisdom of 10 years. Of
You have
diabetes.
Facebook friends?
We have wisdom.
And you have Facebook friends?
So Anne wants to know, she says, I would love your daughter's perspective. And I'm going to ask Leah about this. But I'm going to turn that and say, what about the attention that we had to give him and how we handled that with Leah? Because I have felt very guilty about that over the years.
You were much more aware of that than me. But I don't know.
Well, I think it comes in part because I do much more with the diabetes in our house. Not that we were a very equal team for a very long time because of our schedules. And even now, I could go away tonight, no prep. Maybe I will for a couple of days.
See ya.
And I wouldn't have to worry. That's great. I wouldn't have to worry. You can do everything. But you don't fuss over it as I do. I would definitely give him more attention. And I think what I've done over the years is just explain to Leah.
That's just my attempt to make it normal.
I know. That's just who you
Normalize it.
are. Yeah. I'm not criticizing. There's many other things to criticize. So I'm not that. And so I've talked to her about it. I've just straight up, diabetes requires more attention.
Yeah, and as she got older, she recognized it, and she, it bothered her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she went through some pieces of it that really bothered her, but I think in some ways it kind of helped her grow. I don't want to say quicker, but grow deeper.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And have much more self-awareness at an age maybe she wouldn't have, because you probably would have coddled her like you did Benny if you didn't have it for some other reason.
She's a solid kid. But I tried to do things like just special things, me and her, going away for a weekend,
Right.
That kind of stuff. And that's always been nice. I think it's also helpful that it's, a girl versus boy. So I can be like, oh, mom and girl things. We can do weekends away and that kind of stuff. That if I had 2 daughters might be different. Who knows, whatever. The dynamics are always different. But yeah, she had a harder time with it when she was a little younger, and she's really solid about the whole thing now. She gets it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Shira writes, another Facebook question here. Shira says, has diabetes ever stopped or restricted him from doing something he wanted to do? If so, did he fight it or have to give up and accept it? She says she's concerned about her daughter being discriminated against. I don't think there's ever been a time. I will say there are times when we travel that I hesitate to disclose because of other people's preconceptions about diabetes. So I usually like to tell everybody, but every once in a while you'll come across something where they say, like, don't get on this roller coaster, for example. And they're talking about type 2, where they're talking about being in very poor health with diabetes.
Yeah. See, I don't tell anybody unless I feel as though it's necessary, or if I'm telling a story, or if someone's inquisitive. But when he's doing an activity, he decides he wants to do the activity first, and then after he decides he wants to do it, we'd say, oh, by the way, he has type 1, so here are some things he has to
that's true.
pay attention to.
I mean, he's played baseball, basketball.
Right, but we don't say, hey, he has type 1, can he do this? We say, hey, he wants to do this. And we go, okay, yeah, he wants to do it. He signed up. He's ready to go. And oh, by the way.
Well, it's always on the form, but we've learned over the years, no one looks at the form. The coaches never know. We always have to tell them. But I'm trying to think, so what has he done sports-wise? He did flag football.
Soccer
for 5 minutes.
No, he did 2
Yeah, okay.
seasons
So 2 seasons of soccer when he was little. Flag football, basketball. Baseball for a long time.
Yeah.
And then we thought he might do football this year, but he went out for the play. Yes. Very happy about that. So I don't think it stopped. It hasn't stopped him from going to regular sleepaway camp. No. He went on the field trip with his 5th grade for 3 days without us.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it stopped him from doing anything.
No, I just think that for us, it's not starting the conversation with diabetes. It's starting the conversation with, is that something that we want him to do, or we think is okay, or he really wants to do? Prue, does you really want to do it? You're not just poking around. And once so we don't start the conversation with that. It's part of the conversation. It's not the start of it. And it shouldn't be, I don't think.
All right. Did we miss anything? Come on. There's got to be something.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious to get your take. I've always been really involved. I jumped right in and did the JDRF board and did all this stuff. And now I have the podcast. And, what do you think of all that? I'm either fishing for compliments, or I want you to tell me that it's too much time and I should make dinner more.
Not at all. I think, listen, we live our lives and we tell our kids this every chance we get, right? If someone's in need and you have the ability to help, you help. And that's what you're doing, right? It's not about what's in it for you. It's not about why you should do it. It's just if you have the ability, you do it. So, not only do you have the ability and not only are you helping, but it happens to be a big part of our lives. So it's what you should be doing. If you have a way of falling into grooves that you're supposed to fall into, right? And you're just in a really good place with it right now, using your talent as a broadcaster to keep a dialogue open for other people that are experiencing the same things.
Thank you, honey. Slade and I met at a TV station, and he was a behind-the-scenes guy. He was a newscast director. You'd think he'd know to sit closer to the microphone. You keep leaning back. I hope I hear you okay.
That's because my seat's a long way away. She didn't set the studio up correctly. I would have done it very differently.
True. Okay, time to talk to Benny. This was a tough one. Not because we were emotional, but because he would prefer to make chicken noises and play with my microphone than talk about diabetes. I think that's normal. You will notice some editing here. I did the best I could, but sometimes there was just something wacky going on. And the things I edit out are just large pauses, or me yelling at him, or him, like I said, making some weird noises. I may regret not doing more editing, but I was encouraged by friends and some people that I respect in the diabetes community to leave as much as it is. So here we go. Okay. So has diabetes stopped you? What do you do? What's your life like? What are some of the things you like doing?
Acting.
So tell me about acting. When did that start?
Last year when I went to Camp Coleman, I was in the school camp play, and that's where it really started.
What was the play, and who were you?
Oh God, do I have to say?
No. You don't have to.
It was Larry Potter. I was Haggard.
So
not Hagrid, Haggard.
So it was they could take off on Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And then this year in the school musical, you got into that.
Elf the musical. It's the story of Buddy the Shelf. It's the story of Buddy the Shelf. It's the story of...
Okay, so when you're auditioning for stuff like that...
right off the shelves.
When you're auditioning for something like that, I worry about diabetes because we have to do some extra stuff. You don't really worry about it, though, right?
As soon as the show starts, I don't care about it.
Well, but I mean, during rehearsals, you're on your own. During, ahead of time, do you have to think about anything like that? Do you?
Ahead of time, I check my blood sugar before the show, and I also correct or give myself some sugar if I need to. And then once the show starts, I don't care.
Okay, very nice. But what was interesting about this show is that one of the kids on the tech crew has type 1, and Miles.
Oh, Miles, yeah.
And he helped you out he helped me out.
Yeah.
Before one of the performances because you were low. I thought it would be better to send Miles than another kid or a teacher because they might have panicked. Was Miles cool about it?
Yeah, he was like, Benny, your blood sugar's low. Drink something or eat something or get drunk.
I don't think he said get drunk.
Get it? Because drink something.
I got it. But does that make it a little bit easier knowing that he understood?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So what stinks about diabetes? Like what makes you go, ugh, all the time? Besides your mother.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So, it's hard. And annoying. And dumb. And stupid. And it can fly. Because it has Dumbo the elephant. Hey, I'm trying to make this fun. You is making this boring. You is like, la 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 la, and I'm like da 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 da, and you're like la la la. And I'm like yeah, and you're like da, and I'm like yeah, and you're like da, and
Okay,
I'm like
right.
and you're like da.
This is what your whole part of the interview is going to be. All right, let me ask you a real question. I got a question from someone on Facebook who wanted to know if you tell new friends that you have type 1, like right away, which I think I know the answer to, but I'm curious.
I do not tell them right away, but if my blood sugar ever goes low with them, only low, I'll tell them and I'll explain it to them, and then they give me food.
Yeah, well, you have a couple of friends around the neighborhood that you've known forever.
Yeah.
Like somebody like
Kaylin Miller.
Does he know what to do, or just you just
I'm
tell him
like
what to
my
do?
blood sugar's low. He runs upstairs and gets me juice.
That's good. And I know one of your favorite things to do in this neighborhood is riding your bike and jumping on a trampoline.
Oh, that's fun.
Any advice for kids who are newly diagnosed with type 1?
Don't be scared, or I'm gonna find you and tickle you to death.
What if they worry that they won't be able to do the things that their friends can do?
Well, then you should stop doing that.
Yeah,
You should stop thinking about not being able to, and you should do it.
Well, how do you do it if you're worried about your blood sugar being
You
low?
shouldn't be worried, because your mom's there.
Tell me what goes on like when you were playing baseball.
My mom was there.
Do you understand that you have diabetes? Like, do you know anything about it?
No.
I would assume that one of the worst things that you go through is the annual blood draw.
The blood draw scary.
Yeah, tell me about that. When you were little, it was really bad.
It was scary, and one time they were like sticking a needle in my arm, and it's like I want to look away, but I can't. But I want to look away, but I can't. But I want to look away, but I can't.
Does it hurt more when you look at it?
It hurts more when it's not in.
Oh, once it goes in, it's okay.
But it's like, it punctured the skin, it like, and then it's in, and you're like, okay.
We should get you some voice work on cartoons. You'd be good at that. Yeah.
You need to put all of this in.
How do you feel when you're low?
I feel my legs are like not working, and I don't make sense.
Have you ever been in a situation at school this year where you've been low and felt like that? Like, what do you do at school?
I drink a juice box.
Very illuminating. How do you feel when you're high? Are you high right now? That would explain a lot. How do you feel when you're high?
I cuckoo.
Yeah, no doubt.
Cuckoo clock.
I know you don't remember first getting the pump because you were too little. Do you remember throwing it across the floor the first night?
Nope, but I remember you telling me.
Do you remember the little pouches you used to have with like the cartoon characters on them and stuff?
No.
Okay. What do you think of the Dexcom? Like, how about...
It's scary sometimes, but...
Why is it scary?
Yeah, because big needle.
Oh, putting it on is scary. Yeah, it is kind of crazy.
They go, ka-chum! And Daddy, like, you slowly take out the other side, and he, like, can't get it out, and he's like, ah! And then he can't put the transmitter in and tear off the other side without breaking my arm.
But once, and why don't you let me do it if he does such a good job?
Because you're bad at it.
I'm worse?
Yes. Very.
How am I bad?
Because you go, like, you go really slow in and really slow out.
There was that time.
And then you like, and you, one time you didn't take it out and you tried to pull it out and you broke my arm.
I can't wait till they get that new inserter. Okay, let me ask you, what would you tell a newly diagnosed kid who's afraid or worried about playing sports? You play a lot of sports.
Oh, well, don't tell him to not be worried, because my first year, that was by far the most supportive year I had with diabetes, especially in baseball. It was that first year I tried, and my coaches were really good, and everyone was just really supportive.
That's great. How would you explain it to your friends if you were you knew your blood sugar was high and it was making you cuckoo?
I would tell them, and that if I said anything completely bozolific, that it was just the blood sugar talking.
You would make them aware. You wouldn't try to cover it up. When you're riding the school bus, did you ever go low? And if so, what did you do about it?
So actually, one time my insect came out on the bus, and I went to the bus driver and I'm like, step on it.
No, you didn't.
And we went, brum, brum. We went faster.
Is that a true story?
Yeah.
That's not a good story.
Why?
What's your favorite treatment for low blood sugar?
The straight sugar.
Really? Like sugar packets?
No, like, remember the sugar things that went
Pixie
out of business?
sticks.
No. The sugar packets that we used to buy that ran out of business.
The glucose powder.
The glucose puppies.
Those were great. Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that. Okay, so if you can't have those, what do you like? And our dog is here now.
Juice boxes.
Juice boxes. Tell me about diabetes camp. Do you sit around and just say, woe is me, we have diabetes?
Mm-hmm.
Can you sing the song, the one that's kind of outdated? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Sing that for me. Come on.
We put our fingers and we pee on a stick. We can't eat sugar because it makes us sick. But we're diabetics and we'll never fail, because we're at CAROLINA trails.
Tell me before we go about regular camp, because a lot of kids with type 1 don't go to regular camp. All right, let's talk.
Regular camp is fun, and as long as people somewhat know about your diabetes, you're okay. But don't go if you're newly diagnosed.
Why?
Because you want to get used to it before you, like, go on an adventure with it.
What do you have to get used to?
Everything.
I'm asking for real. Like, what kind
You
of
want
things?
to get used to changing your own insets, because people will not do that for you, especially at diabetes camp. Like, Jeffrey wouldn't let me, he wouldn't do it for me.
Right, but if you were newly diagnosed, they would help you at diabetes camp. They just know your shenanigans. Jeffrey's known you since you were little.
Yes.
But his mother's your diabetes educator.
She is.
What else do you do? Because when you're at up here, the dog is not a microphone. When you are at regular sleepaway camp, you have to change your insets, change your cartridges, everything pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that ever scary, or is it just part of going to camp?
It's just part of going to camp. Sometimes it's scary, but other times it's fun.
Is it worth doing? Like, is it worth all the work to go to camp?
Yes.
What do you do that you like it so much? Like, why?
Gaga ball.
Oh, so one of the things you like about Camp Coleman is Gaga Ball. Tell me about why.
So it's fun because there are other better people, and it's challenging to win, and you also get to have fun, and it's the most favorite game of all time.
Do you get homesick when you're away?
Nope, but people do. Not me though. I'm not homesick. I'm not homesick until the day we come home.
All right, so here's a question. We talked about this in Atlanta.
Because my home is Camp Coleman. It's home away from home. I'm homesick when we get home.
We talked about this when we did that presentation in Atlanta. What are some dumb things you've had to deal with that people who don't understand diabetes have asked you?
Why do you have a phone? Why are you a robot?
What do you tell them? Like, do they really think
I
that your
came
pump's a phone?
from an alien world.
Do they think your pump is a phone?
Yeah, they think my pump is a phone, and when they say, why do you have robot stuff on you? I say, I come from a different world.
Do you ever just tell them straight up?
Once.
When you did when you were little.
I did when I was little, but, like, now I just joke around with them, and it's like, I came from a different planet. I am here to destroy
What about, want to tell the story about the nurse at Camp Coleman?
Oh, God, no, you can. Do it right now. Do
Okay.
it. Do it.
So my understanding is that Benny, there are great medical staff at this camp, but they don't specialize in diabetes. And so there was a nurse who saw you eating ice cream, or you asked to eat ice cream?
Oh, I asked if I could have Smart Pop.
Oh. And she said, what's your A1C? And you were like, what? You were like 9 years old, right? So what did you do?
I do not know.
You don't remember?
No, that's what I did.
Oh, you said you didn't know your A1C.
Because I didn't.
So did you eat the Smart Pop anyway?
Yeah. I was like, I want Smart Pop.
I think you found another nurse, right? I don't know why the nurses were involved in popcorn. Were you in the infirmary?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell the other one about the sugar.
I don't remember that one.
Okay, so, I wanted Smart Pop again, because Smart Pop is the best pop. And, she said how much sugar's in it. And I'm like, and I said, I don't need to know how much sugar's in it. And she's like, yes, you do. And I said, no, I don't. I need to know how many carbs. And she's like, who's your doctor? They're obviously not telling you right.
Yeah, oh, that's right. That's right. Well, my favorite was when one year I said something to them. No, one year the nurses sent me a text. And they said, when you grow up to you, that you could be a diabetes educator. You knew so much.
Educator.
And you said, I already am a diabetes educator.
Because I was.
Because you basically are. You feel like you're going to be okay?
Yes.
When you grow up, what are you going to be?
Actor.
What kind of actor? Like singing, dancing,
Yes.
action movies?
Yes.
All of the above.
All of the above minus gooey, chicky movies and Macbeth.
So no kissing and no Shakespeare.
No.
Other than that, you're okay. Well, Benny, it's been a great pleasure talking to you today.
I know, this was fun. I got to ruin the whole show.
I'm not sure we have anything we can use, but I appreciate your time.
I appreciate the thought.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
He is exactly the same, right? He's exactly the same, just with a deeper voice. Honestly, what a joy for me to listen back to that, to Benny and to Leah, and to my husband, who doesn't really talk that much about diabetes. Going to Mom's Night Out, he's been at all the Mom's Night Out events. He has loved it. It's been wonderful for me to watch. He's asked some questions of people. He's spoken up. It's been really cool. But that's the only time that we've ever really sat down and analyzed diabetes in that way. And by the way, if you have a podcast and you have kids, make sure to record them as soon as you start your podcast. That was just such a cool time capsule for me to hear both kids. And Leah's exactly the same too. I mean, she's got the same mannerisms. She speaks exactly the same. Her voice is a little younger. She was already in high school at that time. But, she's on her own. She's an adult with a job and out of my house, which is good and sad as well. But she's a pretty cool kid. All right, if you liked what you heard, please share this episode. It's an unusual one. I'd love to see what the reaction is. And please join me for Mom's Night Out Charlotte in February and our other 3 stops in 2024. I will link that up in the show notes as well. Thanks to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.